I'm here at St. Stephen's Catholic Church in Portland, Oregon, and today is the fourth day in our Novena to St. Philomena. Well, we have another exciting episode today, and this is the great miracle of Mugnano of Madame Pauline Jaricot. This is a famous miracle, and Pauline Jaricot plays a part in introducing St. Philomena to the curé of Ars, St. John Vianney, but we'll hear about that in another episode. But let us take a look at chapter 4 of St. Philomena the Wonder Worker by Father Paul O'Sullivan, OP, originally published in 1925 and currently reprinted by Tan Books. Chapter 4 is entitled The Great Miracle of Mugnano. One of the most illustrious heroines which the Church has given to the world in modern times is without doubt the sweet French girl, Pauline Marie Jaricot. Now, many were the obstacles which this noble child had to confront while following the high but arduous career marked out for her by God. She was the favorite daughter of wealthy parents, from whom she inherited a vast fortune. Her beauty was striking and singled her out in the most fashionable gatherings as an object of admiration. And added to this, she was clever, bright, and gay, gifted with a most attractive personality, and possessing a heart overflowing with gentleness and affection. Everything in the girl drew one toward her. Society was at her feet. Notwithstanding the allurements of pleasure and the soft flattery of many friends, Pauline always felt a call to higher things. God beckoned to her one way, and the world another. This first combat was long and fierce, but at last grace triumphed, and the victory was for God. The next struggle was that our heroine was destined to encounter. Was of a far different nature. She lost her beloved mother at an early age, and at the same time fell herself prey to a violent disorder which attacked both body and mind, leaving her a veritable caricature of her former self. This trial, like the former, was long and intensely painful. And after this came a breathing space, which in turn was followed by a still more grievous malady, which kept her for long years at the very gates of death. Wonderful are the ways of God, who ever purifies in the crucible of suffering the souls which he has chosen for great designs. It was this sorely tried child who was to give the Church 3 of its most important modern associations, each of which is gathering into the fold of Peter millions of abandoned souls. Her first work was the foundation of the Living Rosary, the fruits of which are incalculable. The Society for the Propagation of the Faith came next. This society infused in an incredibly short time new life and vigor into the foreign missions, and extended still further their already vast radius. By a simple system, the inspiration of Pauline herself, abundant funds flowed in from all parts, enabling the missionaries to achieve results far in excess of their wildest dreams. And finally, if not the sole foundress, she at least took a leading part in the establishment of the Holy Childhood, an association which is annually rescuing countless babes from the horrors and degradation of paganism. Well, Pauline's life story is well worth perusal, not only because it is teeming with interest, but much more because it sets before us an example which might well serve as a model and stimulus to other girls who, like her, could do great things for the world had they only the necessary confidence in God and themselves. Unfortunately, it does not come within the scope of this work to give a more lengthy account of Miss Jaricot. We refer to her merely because of her connection with St. Philomena, by whom, as we shall see, she was miraculously restored to health, and whose devotion she was instrumental in spreading all over France, and indeed throughout the world. We entitled the cure of Miss Jaricot, The Great Miracle of Mugnano. Firstly, because the Holy Father Gregory XVI, who was a witness of it, declared it to be a miracle of the first class. And secondly, because it was the immediate reason why the office and feast of the saint were granted to the universal church. And lastly, because more than any other of the wonders worked at Mugnano, it served to make the name of Saint Philomena known far and wide. We shall allow the young heroine to recount in her own words the history of her illness and the miraculous nature of her cure. Here is her own account. Pauline's illness. It would be well nigh impossible to describe the sufferings I endured for the past 10 years. I do not pretend to give a scientific explanation of all I went through. I merely state what I felt and what I heard the doctors say. Up to March 1835, I was, as a rule, able to bear my pains in such a way that those around me had no idea of what I was going through. After the Revolution of 1831, however, the disease showed unmistakable signs of aggravation. As my malady chiefly affected the heart, in proportion as it increased, the palpitations became more violent, so that they could be heard at a distance. On these occasions, my sides heaved with the agony I endured. A slight movement or change of position was sufficient to send the blood rushing violently back to my heart, thus causing imminent risk of suffocation. My breathing seemed to cease, and the beatings of my pulse became imperceptible, so that the most drastic remedies had to be applied to restore some degree of heat to my frozen limbs. The abnormal dilation of my heart compressed the lungs, and breathing became a positive torture. As a consequence, I was compelled to lie perfectly still, lest the overcharged blood vessels should burst. In the part of my chest where the palpitations were most violent, a cavity was gradually formed, into which the food that I attempted to swallow lodged, causing still further danger of suffocation. The doctors now made 2 openings in my side, in a vain effort to check the progress of the disease, and with a view to lessen the danger of suffocation. I was, in consequence, reduced to such a state of pain and exhaustion as made it evident that death could not be far off. During these awful years of torture, I had some short intervals of relief. The most appreciable of these was at the end of a novena made to Saint Philomena. The body of this virgin martyr had been recently discovered in the Roman catacombs, and the marvels wrought by means of her precious relics were so extraordinary that the name of Philomena was on every tongue. At the mention of this dear name, I experienced intense joy and longed to kneel at the shrine of this illustrious virgin. But alas, such a thing seemed impossible, for her sanctuary was far away in Naples, and I was unable to bear the least fatigue. Yet I felt inspired to go to the sanctuary of the Sacred Heart at perilous, not indeed to ask for a cure, but to settle the affairs of my soul. Utterly worn out with pain, I said to myself, I survived the fearful shock and excitement of the bombardment, and though weeks and months have passed, I am still alive. Surely there is some hidden design of God's providence in all this. And I knew that the Association of the Living Rosary was praying for me. So, placing my trust in God and these good prayers, I resolved on a step which, had it been known, would certainly have been deemed pure and simple madness. In fact, I had some scruples about the matter myself, as I had no wish to do anything of which my conscience did not fully approve. I therefore elicited from the doctor the information that my state was so desperate that nothing I might do mattered much one way or another. This declaration set my scruples at rest. When I mooted the project I had at heart, I met at once with opposition. Though he was not aware of it, I heard the doctor say in a whisper, "Let her alone, let her go. She will not go far." The difficult journey. The preparations for the projected journey had been made in secret, so Pauline started immediately in a carriage for perilous, accompanied by her chaplain, a young lady friend, and a confidential servant. So this is now a narrative. This is no longer her words. The few who knew of her departure said, "She will not reach the first resting place alive." Even those who accompanied her feared that every jolt of the carriage would cause her death. However, no such thing happened. She arrived safely at her journey's end and settled the affairs she had so much at heart. And then she said to herself, "This first journey did not kill me, so let me go to Rome and get the Holy Father's blessing." This was the ambition of her life. If we think of what a journey to Rome meant in those days of coach traveling over the Alps, through wild and abandoned stretches of territory infested with brigands, we shall be able to form some idea of the heroic faith and magnificent courage of this young girl. The journey was at all times wearisome and full of danger, but for one in Pauline's state of exhaustion, and with so small an escort, it was perilous in the extreme. Death seemed to dog the steps of the travelers. The pains endured by the poor invalid were excruciating. Only when her sufferings were most intense could she be induced to make a short halt, and even then after the briefest rest. She would insist with indomitable courage on pursuing the journey. When the party reached Chambéry, Pauline herself lost hope and resigned herself to die far from home and far from the Vicar of Christ. Her weakness was extreme, and she completely lost the use of her senses, remaining unconscious for 2 whole days. The pupils in the convent of the town made a novena to St. Philomena for her recovery, and at its conclusion, she was much better, and the journey was resumed. The snow was now so deep on the road over the Alps that, notwithstanding their powerful horses and the valuable aid of sturdy mountaineers, their progress was slow and difficult. As they reached the summit of Mount Cenis, a glorious view burst on their delighted gaze, and they halted for some time to contemplate the magnificent panorama that stretched before them. As they gazed on this wondrous scene, a beautiful child suddenly appeared. No one knew whence he came, and approaching the carriage where Pauline lay, smiled on her sweetly and presented her with a beautiful white rose, which exhaled a delightful perfume. The guides had never before seen the child, who disappeared as quickly as he had come, nor could they form any idea of who he might be. The rose, they declared, could not have bloomed in the mountains. No such flowers were found in these regions of snow. And the little incident was a consolation for the travelers after all they had undergone. Pauline's companions saw in it a symbol of the beautiful present she was about to make the Holy Father, nothing less than the gift of her first great work, the Living Rosary, of which the white and fragrant rose was so fit an emblem. And now we go back to her narrative. On our arrival in the Italian plains, she goes on to write, we were forced to travel by night, as the heat of the day was excessive. I had no fear of brigands or of evil spirits, since we were under the protection of Our Lady and St. Philomena. We made sure to have their medals hung on the carriage, and we likewise gave one to the postilions. It was 11 o'clock at night when we reached the foot of the mountain of Loreto, and though warned that the roads were not safe, we pushed on in the hope of soon reaching the house of the Holy Family, now the Basilica of Loreto, which we did as the dawn was breaking over the hills. Here again the invalid had a serious relapse, and once more all hope was lost of saving her life. Nevertheless, she rallied, and after a few days' rest, started anew on the road to the Eternal City. During this last stage of her journey, the attacks were frequent, and she arrived in Rome in an almost unconscious state. The nuns of the Sacred Heart at the Trinità dei Monti received her with the greatest affection. Her weakness was extreme, and it was simply unthinkable that she should leave the convent. And thus, after a long and perilous journey in which she had braved so many dangers, and even death itself, she had to halt at the very threshold of the Vatican. She could go no further. The Blessed Mother and Saint Philomena were with her, and she was not to lose her reward. The Holy Father soon heard of her arrival in Rome, and aware of the state of exhaustion in which she lay, resolved with truly paternal affection to go himself and visit his dear daughter, whom he so tenderly loved and who deserved so well of Holy Church. But we're going to stop there because it's starting to get dark outside, and this continues for a little bit. It's worth us waiting to hear more about this miracle and its completion. We know there's going to be a miracle, and nevertheless, we'll wait to hear the rest of the story until tomorrow, the 5th day of the Novena. So, now join me to pray the Novena prayers. You'll need to click on a link in the description below this video for another video which has the Novena prayers, and you'll need to click on another link in the description below this video for the Novena prayers themselves. You can print them out as a PDF copy. So, join me tomorrow for another exciting episode in our Novena to Saint Philomena, and don't miss a day of prayer with us.